I sit here in a focused way, not heavy, but there is concentration. I am doing something, even though the body is still. I, the soul, the being inside, I'm doing something. I'm moving away from the usual worldly thoughts and moving towards what is sacred and timeless, awakening ancient memories. I am remembering. And from remembering, I experience. In the stillness within, the very subtle silence, I experience my true, authentic, eternal, original self. That deep peace, deep calm, a very simple and sweet serenity. Royal, dignified, elevated. The depths of the self. I dive into that experience. And everything else is washed away. What is not me, washed away. The feeling of bathing in truth. Always makes me feel close to what is divine. Close to God's vision on me, bathing in the truth. Letting it imprint deeply on the self. My aim is to have that impress so deeply on the self that when I come out of the stillness into sound, into action and interaction, I don't leave this experience behind. I don't revert back to the ordinary, the worldly, the image. I bring this authentic sense of self. Let it flood through my actions and interactions. This is the final step from remembering to experiencing to applying, practicing. All steps are needed to emerge my original nature. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Good evening to Interview the Raj Yogi. Tonight's topic is emerging one's original nature. And so I was actually reflecting on this word original. I could have used the word true. Maybe original may not make sense to some, but you probably know, and some of those who've joined may also be aware, some classic philosophers known in history who've been having these conversations of one's true nature is good, is neutral, is bad. And so that's why the word original is quite selective. So could you share a little bit in terms of just introducing for those why the word original is quite unique? True nature, of course, is it could obviously be used.
I think we all have a really good understanding of original when we look at it just in its most simple form. But first, of course, the word original has origin in it. So we're talking about what was at the beginning or at the starting. And if we look at physical things and we say, restore it back to its original nature when it was new, when it first started. So the original state of a car or the original state of a house is new, right? It was new at the beginning. So this is what we're talking about with original, is that first new, or we could say pure state. Nothing's happened yet. So that first very pure starting state. So it's only when things get mixed in. So we're looking at what is that pure or beginning state of the human spirit. And of course, there's lots of debate about that. And yet in our hearts, we keep sort of yearning, longing. And I've noticed that a lot when souls come. Some even actually have tears. There's a deep longing or yearning in the heart for something we're not sure. We're very touched when we experience it. And I think it's that yearning for the original state. So it must be something good or a positive experience for the soul. So this is something each has to reflect for themselves. But the premise of Raj Yoga is that, yes, the original state of every human soul is pure and elevated and good. That's what we're yearning for. And then it changes over time. So we start to lose that new or pure original state.
It's interesting you're talking about that yearning. Do you feel that even if one hasn't have taken Raj Yoga, that would really speak to them? And because I was thinking about that today in terms of some souls who are just destined to do great things. And if it's, I don't know, they're not taking Raj Yoga, but there's something in them that programs them, not like something external, but something within themselves that they're pulled to do something. But it feels like such a bigger picture in terms of being able to understand the self.
Yes, it's interesting. We were talking about that the other day, that, because we perhaps have spent so much time away from that original state, we start to kind of lose a little faith in it. So many are afraid to go into the space we'll need to go into to restore or affirm our faith in the original state. And that's that quiet space inside. They're worried if they go in there, they'll just, sort of get immersed in the darkness. And actually, that's on the surface. That's kind of emerged on our surface. Whereas if we go very deeply inside, and I think the proof is in there for ourselves. We're kind of waiting for science or someone else to validate that. And we actually have to go deep inside and experience that ourselves. Some are pulled to do that. Some are afraid to do that. Time and again, I'm really surprised. I was reminded of this again today, how much fear there is to move into that space inside, to have a discipline of going into that space inside. but we're already in an uncomfortable place. So there's a fear of going in, but there's also not a lot of comfort staying out. So we're caught betwixt and between. But it's only by going inside that I really am going to get the proof that that is my original state.
So if we're sort of caught in between, what have you found very helpful to get unstuck, to maybe ride that strange experience one is in? Because you've been in this study for quite some time, and for those who have, sometimes the obstacles inside can be quite challenging.
I know we've talked about this so many times, so I don't know if we'll go into this very deeply, but quite frankly, it always comes down to timing. That if it's my time, if it's my moment to wish to do that, then nothing really will stop me from doing it, even all of that opposition inside, if it's my time. But I think, that there's needs to be a lot of patience. And I think there needs to be the right support, to have the right guidance, if you will, the right pathway of how to go in there, which includes all of the hiccups that can happen along the way. So that's been something that I think we've really appreciated in this practice. If we have senior students ahead of us who have done it and can share with us what's going to happen along the way and what we can do to address it. And then it's really up to each one whether or not they apply that guidance. Is it their time? What speed will they move at? It's a very personal thing that has to be respected.
What do you think is the role, or is there a role in terms of, there's different entry points, and some, the whole point is that, you're really sitting with some eternal truths for something to be awakened. Some do have an approach of visualization. And what do you feel that plays a role in? We do have certain pictures, and the hope is to jog something inside. But what are your thoughts about that?
I remember a student sharing their experience with the visuals, and they are quite important because a picture is worth 1,000 words, and words can sometimes confuse us, whereas the visual can be a bit more universal and clear. But they were sharing that they're not really a visual learner, but you do have to be a visionary. So the visuals or some other modality is trying to get us to an experience that's actually beyond the senses. That can be a bridge, and it's a very universal and powerful bridge, but even that may not work for everyone. But I want to get to the experience that's on the other side of a visual, which is that freedom, that lightness, that royalty, elevation, that original. I want to feel it, is what I'm trying to do now. We talk about the intellect, which is that bit that remembers, that can touch that ancient memory. The intellect is the eye of the soul. So we often use this idea of seeing or vision, but we know that seeing in an academic setting means I understand. So when I say, oh, I see what you mean, it's not that I'm actually seeing something. It means that I've understood. So that's really the vision that we're talking about, is, do I understand? Is it reality? Am I experiencing? That's what we need to check within the self, or drama will sometimes check it for us.
It's so clarifying, because sometimes souls are looking for a vision. And for some, that's actually what has brought them into the study. But it's interesting how it seems like it makes sense when it comes to just, physical education, just science or so forth, or anything, mathematics. Oh, I understand. I see what you mean. We even use that word. But for some strange reason, the moment it goes into spirituality, it kind of takes a different turn when we talk about seeing.
In all cases, physical, that sort of exciting experience, and the ultimate spiritual. Seeing is such a role. Even science, seeing is believing. It's a very strong feeling, and so we're expecting that proof to emerge in a certain way, either through science endorsing it or having a vision. Where actually what I want is for this, this third eye. I think the most compelling sight is to feel it. A memory is awakened. This is a very unique form of seeing, if you will. It's still seeing. And therefore, I am going to have this incredible faith. We call it open-eyed faith, but it becomes reality. So we say real eyes. I realize it. Again, I'm not needing to have visuals. It's just like, it's truth. Someone who doesn't have physical sight, is blind, can realize. So, do I realize I'm a soul? Is that how I see or experience myself? Don't need a visual, but the experience is that I'll feel very detached from the costume. I won't feel like anything. So the significance, and nothing belongs to me. So the significance starts to come to life. And that's real eyes.
It's fascinating how just, to understand something in a much more deeper way helps one to also diagnose oneself. Then I'm checking in any aspect I'm learning in the study. Am I trying to visualize something again? Or do I see, I understand. And especially at the times when you really need a much more unlimited understanding versus things that are happening at face value. So when it comes to this aspect of original self, it's interesting because now I'm just using a physical example. At the where I work, and we have souls who come there with pain that their body has, that have been long-term pain, and they're still there looking for a reason. And it's quite disheartening for them because they're remembering what it originally was like to not have pain. So it is disheartening in a way, because I wonder if in general, souls feel like there's no way I'm going to be able to get back this original sense of self that I have. And I was speaking to a soul about that a couple of weeks ago, and she calls it that spark in her, that she senses it in others, and perhaps maybe through time losing hope that it's possible to have that back again, when everything in physicality seems like it just goes down and down, and it's not like it can get restored. Mm-hmm.
I think because of that mountain of doubt that might be there, it's very worthwhile when, especially beginning the spiritual path, because foundation is so important, to be very singular, to use my energy in a very specific way. Where will I invest my energy, to choose wisely? So we saw with the original students who had a very high success rate for those who stayed with it. Their approach was very, very simple, and they invested very, very deeply in just that single thing. They used the knowledge, and they also used their relationship with God to really fortify one thing, which is that faith in the original stage, which we could also call self-worth or self-respect. They really, really concentrated their efforts there and made it very, very strong. And I think that's why it was so resilient and able to override all the things that came along from inside and outside. And I'm remembering a soul. It's quite interesting. Again, it depends on the soul, but a soul that I knew who, yes, very athletic. And it's an interesting thing about chronic pain. And it ultimately requires a great deal of humility to be able to get through this successfully, because they eventually developed very, very severe back pain that ultimately required an operation. And they were able to recognize this pain didn't come from nowhere. They were able to recognize, I can see that I wasn't really doing things accurately. And that's a very important realization, because it means I won't do that anymore. So then it's very empowering. I now have within my hands both the problem and the solution. So the surgery was very difficult. Some of the different steps were very difficult, but they had a very deep, deep determination or faith in themselves from the get-go. And I just was in awe of how it allowed them to move through. I mean, there was medication that easily could have been addictive, and they were very, very adamant about that they did not want to use it. They did not want to get into that cycle. So what was going on inside the soul? I just saw them today. And again, they've just got that humble nature, which is a deep, deep self-respect to be able to see, I can see ways that I did not benefit myself. That's what led to this pain. It's nobody's fault. It's not that they're heavy on themselves. It's very empowering. It's like, okay, if I did that and it led to this, then I can do something different rather than that because of some person or situation. So there's nothing I can do. So the victim starts to come. So I really saw they had a lot of, if you will, self responsibility, self efficacy, self respect. This is critical to establish at the beginning of the path and commit to that. Then I think the soul can really get through a lot that's going to come along.
I'm not sure if when souls think of spirituality or they think of religion, can for some be a pretty heavy word, but I'm putting those together just because they often get couched together. But the intention of me bringing this up is I'm not sure if souls ever connect self respect with spirituality or religion. Perhaps maybe a lot about God, or perhaps a lot about being a good person, but not necessarily about self respect. So some could actually forget that, even being in a study, you're trying so hard, you can forget, because self respect and the original nature, those two are deeply connected.
So often with the Brahma Kumaris, with Raj Yoga Rest, what religion do you belong to? And we say we're non denominational, which sounds almost secular, if you will. But it's interesting in secular circles that spirituality is perhaps better understood or phrased because, if we look at, say, United Nations or something, it's just personal dignity, which is a right of every human soul. That's really what we're talking about when we say spirituality, that my sense of value, my sense of worth isn't connected to anything physical or temporal. So spiritual just means non-physical. So my sense of self, my worth is now associated with that which is non-physical or timeless. So a deep sense of personal dignity, which we feel is a right, but we've lost complete understanding of how to restore that or sustain it. So it then starts to again become very conditional and very dependent on things outside of ourselves. But that's really the essence of spirituality, or sometimes we say purity, that deep sense of personal dignity, which is non-denominational and belongs to every soul.
It's interesting. I don't know if that word original nature anyone really ever thinks about, because you even hear the word original, you should think, oh, it's original art. It seems to have lost its meaning, or perhaps it's sort of in there somewhere. But I'm really glad that we use that word in terms of really implying that you get yourself back again. I remember having conversations with others, but it was something I was seeking for since young. Is it possible to gain? It's more than gaining your innocence, but that's all I could think about at that time. But really gaining, just your sense of self back. And so, in terms of original, it's such it is a word that many use, but in this context of original nature again, because I remember when we'd have these blessings, and one of the students like, I don't know if they'll understand what you mean when you say original nature.
It's actually a storyline or story arc that's quite ancient from the Odyssey, or recently I was speaking to a soul who really liked this sort of interpretation of the Wizard of Oz. In that story, of course, the soul was in a slumber, if you will, and they find themselves being taken very far from home. And their entire journey is about, of course, discovering things within the self, but ultimately wanting to get back to home. And what it's suggesting is the things that you have been seeking outside are actually much closer than you think. They reside within, they are as close as your home. So, in the same with the Odyssey, it goes on this whole journey just to return back to that original place from which they started, but changed, transformed. Something's been restored or awakened. It's a very classic story arc. So again, it's in our psyche. That understanding is there. It's just, what does that look like in my, in real life? How is that relevant? But we say it all the time. The thing you're seeking is actually closer than you know. But it's a returning. We need to go on some sort of journey for it to emerge. And then we realize, oh, it's actually been in here all along, completely merged. But the journey emerged it. So that's what spirituality is doing, is emerging, taking me on a pilgrimage or journey that's emerging what's always been in there. Very, very classic story arc.
I know we're running out of time, but this has been on my mind all day. But for the regular students, one of the things we're reflecting on was that this art of progressing, to really have such faith in your original self that even in the, what seems like bad things are happening, that having that bigger picture of who you will become again, it really, it's this broad understanding that really helps you to, and it's different from just saying, no, there must be something good in this situation. I realized that. And I remember when I was taking voice lessons, actually with your mother, and she was always saying, Nora, sing to the end of the phrase, because I would never have enough breath. Sing to the end of the phrase. And that stayed with me in terms of that parallel, like, and maybe lately I've been thinking so much we can get so microscopic in the study, but if you don't have such a clear understanding of where you're going and that you will definitely reach where you're going, you can sort of, I don't know, lose the point, even though you're trying to really follow everything that would help you to progress. It's just interesting that analogy of what I've learned in voice lessons. So it's quite powerful.
Ultimately, I guess we have two choices. And one side is saying that we originally are bad, and the other is saying we're originally good. And if we're saying we're originally bad, we're always going to be battling or fighting against that original state. Whereas in spirituality, there's no violence involved whatsoever. We're actually surrendering, releasing to, opening up to that original state. And when we put it that way, violent or not violent, it sort of then affirms which is true, because the deepest desire inside of the entire global family is that cry for peace, that cry for nonviolence. We actually believe deeply in the path of peace or nonviolence. Yes, we're using battling to get there, which is insane, but we really do believe that nonviolence, that peace, is the accurate way to live. So again, there must be some memory inside of there. So any path that endorses peace or nonviolence really allows with that deep, pure desire inside every human soul. And it's something I've really we have to learn in spirituality, is that I am surrendering to that original. I'm not battling against some innate badness. I'm surrendering to an innate goodness. It's a very peaceful path. So it's very aligned with that deep desire in every soul. It's hard for us to learn. We're so used to battling that souls, even if they believe that their nature is peaceful, they're still battling to get there. So have they really tasted?
Battle.
it is, it's just a lot of work, and you do start to lose faith in yourself, you know, and you're not able to really use the method that's suggested. You know, a child could tell you the only way to peace is through peace. That's the method. So, not battling. So, the method that we use is don't try to battle against the darkness. Just embrace the light, the truth. I am a peaceful being, and let the power of that create the path. So, I think it's something that each one has to sit with in a very open way and in a very quiet way. And that's really the ultimate place to get proof, not because I say so or you say so or someone else says so, but each one has to sit with that honestly within themselves. What do they deeply long for? That longing always comes from a memory.
Well, thank you, Judy. Well, we are over time, so maybe we'll have our reflection now.
Our outer world is becoming more chaotic, more unpredictable, more peaceless, even more violent. And each one of us is doing what we can to change our circumstances, perhaps escaping, ignoring, running away, or even maybe transforming. To recognize that outer world is a direct result of the inner world. I can't run away or escape. So if I long for peace and kindness and stability in my outer world, if there's that deep pull, then I have to look inside. I have to have that faith that I can create that state inside. The fact that there is a longing suggests I have known that state. Otherwise, I couldn't seek it. To deeply trust what I long for was a state from which I began. Very peaceful, very stable, very gracious. Everything I demand in the outer world is how I began inside. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. A warm reminder, there is the workshop in English at the Northeast Center, now called the Inner Peace Center, which happens every first Saturday of every month. So that will take place next week. And the timing, I believe, is 1 o'clock to 4:30. But registration is required. I believe it's just on site. There is no online streaming for that. But we have lots of sessions now that are happening on site. There is the practical meditation happening at the Academy on Saturdays at 12:30 to 1:15. Actually, really goes to 1:30. And then we also have the practical meditation that's at the Northeast Center. That's on the Mondays, 6:30 to 7:30. And so there's lots and lots of sessions. So please visit the website for information. Anything that is happening on site at the Northeast Center does require registration, even if it is just the regular evening meditation sessions. So please visit the website for more information. So thank you again for joining. Om Shanti.